order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Brenda, would you please do the roll call?
Director Beck?
Here.
Director Hayes?
Here.
Director Klein-Jerome?
Here.
Director Poston?
Here.
Director Goso?
Here.
Director Potts?
Here.
And Director Barnes?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. All right, Director Poston, would you please read our mission and vision statements?
Mission statement. The Davenport Community School District is dedicated to growing excellence in academics, the arts, and athletics for every child by ensuring the highest quality education in an environment shaped by a diverse community, preparing our students to be lifelong learners and productive citizens. Vision statement. Education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you, Director Poston. Director Beck, would you please read the guiding principles?
Yes. Opportunity. We provide abundant opportunities to empower students to reach their full potential academically, creatively, and socially. Collaboration. We foster an environment that allows students, families, and community stakeholders to come together for the betterment of our students' education and future. Transparency. We share relevant and important information with our students, families, and the community to maintain open and productive communication.
Thank you, Director Beck. Superintendent Schneckloff, would you please read the goals?
Tonight, the focus will be goal number 1, to enhance student learning.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to student board reports. You can start at whichever end you all would like. Don't everybody go at once, though.
Okay. News from Davenport Central High School. We have started our hunger drive this past week, and we are on a mission to help collect as many items for those in need. We have also reached out to our feeder schools like Jefferson and Madison for support with this, so they are also participating with us. Also, Central were the hosts for the 8th grade volleyball tournament this past Saturday. Our National Honor Society is currently having an ongoing bake sale, and the Drama Club is having plays coming up with Map Reader at the end of this month and Ride the Cyclone at the beginning of next month.
And more from our feeder schools, we had on October 10th, Madison had their first grade level family night. So this gave a presentation based on the school safety surveys that we have our students take in the district. And that includes data on academic, social, emotional learning, and generally how our school environments are aiding or not aiding our students to be successful. And then families were able to enjoy spaghetti dinner after. And then Madison will be having a trunk or treat on Tuesday, October 24th, and they're looking for volunteers for that. They've reached out to our cross-country teams at Central and also NHS as well. So we're very excited to be participating in that. And on October 4th, McKinley had their Fall Fest to celebrate the new season, colder weather, less outside time, but we still got to keep our kids happy somehow. Awesome. That's it.
Then for North in their feeder schools, Harrison is hosting a trunk or treat on the 24th. Harrison also had their first skate night, which I know when I was in Harrison, I loved those. So they hosted that last Thursday. Fillmore's also having a trunk or treat. I don't know what day exactly. I know I'm going to it, so it's like probably around there too, 24th. Then at North, our Joy Club, which I'm a part of, is doing a Halloween trivia on, I think, the 28th. Halloween spooky trivia to raise money for Bethany's house. And Green Team's also picking up in front of North for picking up the area. And yeah, that's what we're doing for that.
Hi. So at West, we've been having a big push against our failures. So we've been having meetings with the students and their families, making calls home, and then we've also hosted a catch-up academy last Saturday. So students are able to go in and get help and catch up on any missing work or anything that they're struggling with from teachers. And then we were seeing the effects of that because it went from a whopping 28% to 19% of kids failing in just 2 weeks. And we hope to continue to get that down as we approach the end of term. And then for sporting events on Thursday, we have 2 home events. So there's a home volleyball, just volleyball game. It's senior night against Central, or against North, and then swim has their home meet against Central. So that'll be good. And then we're also starting to wrap up football, and then they have a home meet or a home game at Brady Street. So yeah, senior night, that'll be good. And then we also have no information from our feeder schools at this time.
Yeah, I think so. You guys have an event tomorrow night, right? The band spectacular. None of you plugged it. I just wanted to make sure. And I know North has a drama play this weekend, Outsiders. You got to plug your stuff if you want these folks to show up. Everybody watches on YouTube.
All
I'm
right,
sure the
one more.
superintendent will hit the band spectacular. Go ahead.
One more thing that I forgot. On the cross country team, one of our athletes, Zach Ryan, was nominated as Athlete of the Week. So please go vote Zach Ryan. I'm sure the link will be floating out there somewhere.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. All right. There's no recognitions tonight. Our presentation is board and superintendent long-term goals. I turn it over to you, Director Barnes. To you.
Me, yes. Thank
Over
you.
to the superintendent.
So we've made a slight adjustment to our goals, nothing earth-shattering here, but we wanted to capture the notion that we want to ensure that our students are striving to be the best that they could be. So to help get the consensus of the board, and I called on Director Barnes to see if this would fit the notion of what we're trying to get at. So we added a bullet to goal number 1 where it says all students will graduate with a high school diploma and a certificate or progress toward a certificate. Over the last couple of weeks, we've heard a lot about maximizing our time at Davenport schools. And in our school district, you can graduate with a CNA certificate, a different welding certificate, all the different types of certificates that we have. But you can also take a pathway that can lead you towards an advanced degree. For example, you can take all the engineering and robotics classes that you can to take you towards your engineering degree, or you can take your child development classes that take you towards your teaching degree, of things of that nature. We thought this goal would encompass everything about our students maximizing their schedule, their time with us, and being the best that they can be. And in that way, it captures all of our students. And then on goal number 2, we heard that it's incredibly important, as you heard our student board members talk about all these wonderful things that are going on at our schools, that we need to start keeping track and monitoring the notion that we need to increase the number of students who participate in extracurricular learning activities. And so without adding a goal to each one, we thought those 2 goals really captured what the board was wanting us to add.
You want?
Turn it over to you, Board President.
Oh, well, thank you. Does anyone have anything to add to that? Director Barnes or Director Potts, do you have anything?
President Gose, I just would like to support the addition of the bullet in the first goal. I really like the idea of the symbol that a student has maximized their potential either through a certificate or, of course, through their diploma. I also think that this particular bullet point puts an expectation on school counselors and administrators to have conversations with every student in the school district about maximizing their potential so that they do receive that acknowledgement that they're on the pathway towards success. And I think that's something that can really help the school district stand out. So I'm fully supportive of that addition in particular.
Thank you, Director Barnes. Hold on a second. Director Potts, did you have anything?
I believe we had a brief conversation concerning development of some sort of benchmark to that we were interested in enhancing the needs of those kids who are academically accelerated. We had some input from student board members. That, is this the attempt to address that?
Yes. So for those students that are in AP Physics, AP Chemistry, this ensures that if they're going towards their chemical engineering degree, that everyone around them is having the conversation that you need to be taking this AP class or this honors class. It's more of a goal around what is it that you want to be or become, or the career that you want to have, and then the conversations are around. Then you need to ensure that you are taking the correct pathways and really maximizing their time with us. And in reviewing our growing excellence, we have several direct leading indicators for accomplishing this, increasing the number of students in honors. So by putting this on here, that in turn guides our conversations on a monthly basis around, are we achieving those goals in the growing excellence plan?
Thank you.
Director Klein-Jerome.
Okay, so let's say I'm going through and I'm going into the military. This makes it sound like I have to get a certificate or progress towards a certificate. Is there a certificate for that? Or are there going to be areas where kids are going to college, but we don't have a certificate for it? It almost sounds like it's mandated, but.
No, that's an excellent question. And we have ROTC. So for people that are dedicated to go into the military, as a matter of fact, I just wrote a letter of recommendation for someone who's trying to get in the service academies, which is very exciting. The other thing that we believe here is that all of our students, let's say if I'm going to be an engineer, I distinctly remember the student who did in our student home build, and he was going to Iowa State to be a structural engineer. What that class and what those certificate he gained through that class will do is give him a competitive advantage. So for our students that know they're going to be going into a field or a relatable field, for them to go into that with a certificate is a competitive advantage for us. And that is incredibly important for those students going into those fields. So there's nothing wrong with taking classes, gaining a certificate. There are examples of students who are going into engineering classes that got their welding certificate and they weld their way through college and help pay for those kinds of things. And so that's what's incredibly important about that. The certificate. Not only does it give you a competitive advantage, but it also allows you potential earning income on your way to your 4-year degree.
Okay, but we're not saying that you have to have this or you have to make progress towards it if you're choosing a field that would not go that way. Because this makes it sound like we'll graduate with a high school diploma and a certificate, but maybe that's not the path I want to take.
Yeah, this really pushes every student to be taking the highest level of classes. So think about it. A capstone class would have some type of certificate, and that's exactly what the board asked us to do.
Okay.
So whether that be in visual arts, whether it be, for example, our public health, our public safety pathway, those students, you can't become a police officer until you're 21, but you can take your to be an ambulance driver. What am I missing? Yes, you can get some of your medical certificates out of the way on your way. Your EMT, thank you. That was missing. Sorry about that. You can get your EMT certification or on your way towards that, and then take your classes at Scott Community College and then become a police officer when you turn 21 or a firefighter. So those are the Those are the goals. And by putting this in this way, we are trying to get students to take the highest level of classes possible. And in order to do that, you would have to make sure that you're maximizing your senior year, which is something very clearly that this board has said. So that's why that bullet is in there.
Okay, thanks.
Director Hayes.
I understand where Director Klein Jerome was going with that. My question was pertaining to the students with the core diplomas. How does that affect them?
So by the time you are at the spot where you're being recommended for your core diploma, you are way past the situation where you are looking to take electives to get a certification. That at that moment in your time, you're late in the game, you're ready to that is not a pathway that people can choose. That is something that is an option only for you late in your high school career.
Director Beck.
So I appreciate the point of this. I guess I would be a little concerned about the wording, kind of like what Director Klein Jerome said. I know, for example, we have a very specific term. Certificate means a specific type of program that lasts, it's got a certain number of credits. It lasts a certain amount of time. It's at Blackhawk, right? Scott Community College has the same thing. And so if you're saying certificate or progress toward a certificate, that language has a specific meaning, particularly in higher education or post high school education. So I'm wondering if maybe we can find a slightly different way to describe that, because as we pointed out, somebody who maybe their whole plan is to go to college, they don't know what they want to do necessarily, but they take the ACT and they score really well, or they do the ACT prep class, or they do, a certain AP class, acknowledging that they are maximizing their potential in that way. I'm trying to think of another way of describing it, maybe slightly different wording rather than a certificate, progress toward a certificate, or something additional maybe that doesn't use the word certificate but implies some sort of official documentation. Do you know what I'm saying? I guess I don't want to imply that everybody's going to be on their way to some sort of certificate when they might not be.
Well, I think the intent is that a college when you graduate from college, that would be your certificate. So like
Right.
when I have my diploma, that would
Right.
you could say certificate or diploma.
Yeah, that might work better because that encompasses that broader spectrum of
Yeah,
documentation.
that's kind of what we were going for. So if
Okay.
you were in high school and you knew you were going to go to be an elementary teacher,
Right.
you know that your certificate, is the end of your line is a 4-year degree. So let's go make sure that you have all of the programs, your writing is everything you need, you're taking all the early childhood, and that maximizes everything here, where you probably are going to leave with a certificate in that way.
Right.
And you think about all the pathways that we have, it's hard to imagine not earning something.
Right.
And so let's say, I want to go get a business degree. All right. Well, let's go and get as many of those classes out of the way towards your certificate or diploma.
Right.
So adding diploma, certificate, or diploma.
Or maybe post-secondary certification or something like that would be a way to broaden the scope of that.
As long as we all understand.
Yeah, I
the
mean,
intent
that's
of
just my
that.
suggestion, so.
Yeah. Because these are ours that we are going to come back to at all times. So I don't think there's anything wrong with secondary certificate. On their way to a certificate or a secondary certificate or post or a diploma or something like that.
Yeah, just to broaden that.
That makes sense. That's kind of the intent. So clarifying that makes sense.
Good. Director Poston.
Bullet number 3, under 3. How is that going to take place, and what's the schedule on that?
It's currently being implemented right now, and so it's something that all of our schools are working on, being trained on, and actively implementing.
Is there anything else? Director Potts or Director Barnes, do you have anything?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, I don't.
All right. Thank you.
So adding Brenda and the first one, high school diploma and a certificate or progress towards a certificate/diploma, would that suffice? And then that way we can vote on it that way in the action items. Thank you. Degree. Thank you.
Good. Okay. All right. We will move on to board reports. Are there any board reports? Director Beck.
So McKinley held a very festive Fall Fest, was it last weekend? I wanted to give a shout out to some of the high school students who volunteered there. I know Central National Honor Society and I believe some of the dance team members were there volunteering, so we appreciate that. And then just to give a shout out to Central Cross Country, not only did Zach Ryan end up being listed as one of the potential athletes of the week, I believe he broke the course record at Grace Lutheran Bible Camp course, which is where the DeWitt meet was last week. So congratulations to him. He's only a sophomore, and he broke the course record. And that is a course and a race that people from that schools from all over Iowa run, and so not just the Quad Cities area. It's really impressive achievement. Big shout out to him.
Director Poston.
Yeah, I attended the Student Build Home signing along with President Gosta and Director Klein-Jerome. I was surprised how far along that they already are with the house, and looks good. There's 18 students currently participating. And I do have a couple questions. There were, I believe, 4 Bettendorf students and 1 Pleasant Valley student, and then the remainder, the 13, would be Davenport Schools students. So I just want to make sure that they have Davenport Schools, anybody that wants to enroll in there, they do have first chance at that. Is that correct? Okay. And my other question is, if we have 13 students from the entire district, I guess I'm questioning why we don't have more. And with two instructors there, I guess my thought would be, down the road, would it be possible to have 2 classes and be building 2 houses at the same time?
All right, thank you, Director Poston. I was going to talk about the student home built one. It was an awesome event. Made me want to dust off my tool bags and get out there and show them how to do it. It was a great event. They're doing really good. And then also, Vice President Klein-Jerome, myself, and Superintendent Schneckloff, we did our monthly meetings with the LULAC and the NAACP. Always great to have those groups of people and individuals in the room so that we can collaborate and things like that with community partners. And then the superintendent and myself had our bi-monthly meeting with the Davenport mayor, and are we gonna do the other mayors next? Okay. Just to kind of talk about things there too. So if anyone has any questions on that, feel free to ask. And then the other thing I have on, we're gonna do our student board member reception night. It'll be at our next regular meeting, Monday, October 28th, from 5 to 5:30. It'll be right out there. And student board members, please bring your parents, siblings, and all that stuff, because it's our time to celebrate all of you. And you all should have received this and gotten an email, but we just put it out there public for you too. All right. If there's no other board reports, we'll move on to communications, open forum. Open forum is a time for members of the community to give input at a board meeting regarding school district issues or concerns. Individuals who want to speak, please fill out an open forum request and give it to the board secretary prior to the open forum. The form is available in hard copy for in-person attendees or on the school board page of the district's website for those who want to participate virtually. Virtual participants must email their request to Brenda T. at tbren@davenportschools.org by 3 p.m. on the day of the board meeting. The board will not act on any issue presented during open forum if it was not published as an agenda item. Iowa Open Meetings Law prohibits action on any issue that is not on the agenda. The president may set the amount of time allowed for individuals to speak. The board asks that no charges or complaints be made against individual employees of the district or the community. Remarks that reflect negatively on the character or motives of any person will be called out of order. You will be asked to state your name and home address prior to making remarks. Brenda, we didn't have any virtual participants. We just have one in person. All right, our open forum request tonight is Brian Rothenberger. Did I say
Got
that
it.
right? All right.
And do you need my address? Sure.
Yes, sir. For
2622 East Pleasant Street in Davenport. So, good evening, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Also speaking on behalf of our Vice President of Fan Entertainment behind me, Radar, our mascot. Our opening night is Saturday, which is very exciting. The hockey season is back, but what I wanted to briefly discuss with you today is our Education Day game, which is going to be taking place in February. This is an initiative we started our second year back from the pandemic. I hope many of you have been to a Storm game before. You probably know that they are primarily Friday and Saturday nights around 7 o'clock. Starting 3 years ago, we took one of our 28 home games, we put it on a Thursday and started it at 10:30 in the morning and invited schools from the Quad City area and beyond to come to that game and take in a hockey game as a school, primarily elementary age students. The ticket is incredibly affordable. I know a lot of schools view this as a field trip. It is $6 per student and chaperone, and that includes a lunch. Many of the schools get there around 8:30 or 9 and are gone before noon. Some of them are able to even have some classroom time on that day. Our first year, we had about 4,000 people attend the game, which was a great crowd for us. Last year, we had about 6,900 people attend, and about 5,000 of those were students. Last year, though, of that 5,000, only about 1,500 students and teachers were from the Quad City area schools. So we are very hopeful this year that we can get that number up, get more schools, especially in our local area, to participate and continue to create this great experience. For so many of the students, it's their first time in the arena, first time at a hockey game. We pump in as much educational material as we can on the video board during the game, but it is also a great life experience for these kids to come out and see what a big live event is like as a student. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight. I look forward to seeing you all out at some Storm games this season.
All right, thank you. The board appreciates individuals' input at board meetings. All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. May I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board accept the consent agenda as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Superintendent report.
So I have two things I want to talk about. The first one was briefly mentioned. Tomorrow is Band Spectacular. And if you want to see an excellent example of what it's like to enter a program and exit a program, tomorrow's the night. There's nothing better than watching every single one of our students be on the field at the same time playing the same music. It is a beautiful celebration of what it means to be a Davenport School student. And Brady Street Stadium will be rocking tomorrow night, and it is one of many people's favorite nights of the year. So I urge you to come on out for that event. The second thing, we had it's at Brady Street Stadium, 7 to 8:30 tomorrow. Dress warm. Even though our bands will be heating up the field. Okay, sorry. The second thing, being the third largest employer in the Quad Cities, we oftentimes have some of our talent leave, which allows us to bring new talent in. And tonight Ali Vandermeide took a position with Scott Community College, Eastern Iowa Community College, and we're happy for her. She's been a wonderful asset as she has presented here many times. But I'm very happy to announce that we are going to be voting on, or we just voted on, hiring a gentleman by the name of Mike Vukovic. Mike, if you wouldn't mind standing up. Mike comes to us from Des Moines. He has high school principal experience. An extensive knowledge about this type of programming, and we couldn't be happier that you're joining our team, Mike. And he came today, participated in all the meetings. He's like, I've been to 2 of the high schools, and I've got 1 left to go to. Get there, he's staying in a hotel and just got finalized an apartment. And so, Mike, we're very, very happy you're here. Thank you for joining our team. We know you're going to do great things for Davenport. So thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent. We'll move on to committee reports. Breaking Barriers Committee.
None this time.
Elziak?
We meet on Thursday.
I was going to say, you guys never have a meeting before a board meeting. What's going on? All right.
Technically, it's before the 28th.
Long Range Facilities Planning, Director Potts?
Yeah, we met last Friday morning. As you read in the Friday notes from the superintendent, one of the things we discussed and decided on was some conversion of some upper gym space at West for some indoor facilities for baseball, softball, and maybe golf, and converting some of the space over at the Armory so that Central High School could have baseball, softball, and golf inside facilities. We also talked about making some conversion over there also for a permanent locker room for Central High School at the stadium area. We also talked about or touched on or got informed of the timelines for the letting of the bids for the Sudlow project. The board, we are probably expecting to be voting on that sometime in November. And also talked about letting of bids for, for Frank L. Smart later this month. I believe there's a ribbon cutting that's coming up at West. And we also discussed some of the progress that's being made on the conversion of the old National Guard Armory motor pool into our new bus lot. I think that covers almost everything we talked about.
Thank you, Director Potts. Policy Committee.
We're almost to the end. We are going to vote on 17 policies tonight, discuss one, and then as long as no laws change, I think we are done with policies for this year.
Awesome. Finance Committee.
We meet next week.
Thank you. Legislative Advocacy, we met to discuss doing our breakfast and lunch meet and greet with legislators going into session in December. All right. All right, we'll move on to items requiring action. May I have a motion on subject 10.01?
Mr. President,
Director Poston.
move the board adopt the 2024-25 board and superintendent long-term goals as presented.
Second.
Does it need to, did you already get it updated in there? Perfect. You're the best, Brenda. Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.02, high school course guide?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board approve the 25-26 DCSD course guide as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Poston.
Yeah, we've had discussion earlier on this, but I just for clarification, again, where we're cutting back on the number of credits needed, that is all coming from um, I lost my train of thought now.
Electives.
Electives. So that's all coming back from the electives, right? That's where the cut will be made. No core classes. Okay. And then again, when you're cutting back on the number of electives, what at some point we are going to have to cut back on staff. Correct?
Right now, we are not discussing staffing right now. So our staffing is driven by the classes the students take.
But if you're not requiring as many electives, won't there be a reduction in staff?
There could be an increase in staff. It depends on what the students take. John, Willie, care to add to that? Ben?
Yeah, each year when we go to develop our schedule, it is based on the number of courses taken. And I understand your question, which is if kids take less classes over time, then there'll be less staffing needed to cover the less classes. And the only answer I have to that is depending on where they take those classes will impact that. So if we have a mad interest in or high increase in art, for example, and less increase in business, then by default, we'll have less kids taking business classes, more kids taking art classes, which means we need more art sections than business sections. I think the hesitancy in answering your question is the intent is not to reduce our staff. The intent is to make sure our staff is properly allocated based on student requests and interest. But it's kind of a hard, I mean, if you said, yes, by default, if less classes are taken, that means less bodies needed to support those classes. Yes, but that's not the intent of the work. But it is potentially both ways, as superintendent said, it can be an unintentional consequence in the plus or in the negative, depending on where those requests end up when it's all said and done.
Okay, thank you. But just and one other thing, then we talked about when we were talking about our goals, we were talking about maximizing our students' senior year, and I'm still concerned about the time seniors spend in school. I know some of them have a full load. I understand that, and if they're involved in extracurriculars, whether it's band, chorus, or athletics, or whatever. But my concern is a senior that's going to class for an hour a day and they have enough credits to graduate at that point. So again, to me, that is not maximizing your senior year. And you can't force them to take the electives. I think they're missing out on a lot by not having a full schedule their senior year. And I am also concerned, like I mentioned before, is are we going to have more students graduating as juniors?
Director Beck.
I just want to echo Director Poston's concerns. I am really hesitant to reduce the number of required electives. I'm still going to vote for the schedule change because I know as a whole it's important, but I would like to keep an eye on this because it does concern me. I understand that it doesn't reflect lower standards, but I feel like if there are, though I would love every student to take every elective that they possibly can, we know that's not the reality. And if we want students to take advantage of some of the elective courses that are available to them, we have to say that there's a certain number of credits you need. So just my opinion, my concerns. Otherwise, thank you guys for putting in so much work to bring us this updated course guide. Appreciate it.
Director Potts, do you have anything?
Well, I think we need to remember when we talk elective classes, it's not just like art, but it's business, it's foods, it's foreign language, it's accounting. There's a whole list of classes that are electives. Um, I guess the real question is, in the schedule we've developed, how many credits is it possible to get? I mean, if we've got a schedule that says the most you're going to be able to get is number 23, then saying you can take 28 credits, we can say it, but nobody can take it because there's not that many periods in the day in the 4 years you're in school. Does that make any sense? The superintendent's nodding, so that's a good thing.
I was just getting ready to say that, Bruce, but I couldn't get the mic on. Director Barnes, do you have anything?
I have just one friendly thing. I want to make sure that the letter from the superintendent reflects October of 2024 rather than August of 2024 to be consistent with our voting on this important document.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on it? Oh. Yes, ma'am, you're up.
Thank you. My main concern is I would like to know if like the difference in like course requirements this year as opposed to like the next years are due to like our recent changes in schedule, because since we're changing off the block to a different one that we haven't tried before, I wonder if the time constraint and the difference is why.
That's a good question. I think to answer your question, that we are grandfathering students into classes. Is that accurate? So that way, those students who are juniors now going into their senior year, and will gradually build into the enhanced schedule that we have. Good question.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
I would like to just say that like most people that I know at my school, seniors specifically, don't take a lot of classes if they don't have to. I mean, I know like if you aren't required to, most people won't. And I could see how that could definitely be a bad thing if you aren't requiring it. And but I do think that having openness and having the ability to choose if you want to take electives or if you don't as a senior is also important. It's building responsibility. So I would think that yeah.
Anyone else? All right. Motion's been made and seconded, and I already did the discussion on it, so I will call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Ayes have it, motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.03, the review annual non-discrimination statement?
Mr. President,
Director Klein Jerome.
I move the board approve the annual update of the Administrative Regulations 102B, 102C, and 102D per School Board Policy 102.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on this? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. We'll move on. Can I have a motion on subject 10.04 policies for board approval?
Mr. President, I move the board approve the following policies: 501.15, 502.10, 602.02, 602.03, 602.06, 603.04, 603.05, 604.15, 605, 605.01, 605.07, 605.09, 605.10, 606.02, 606.03, 606.05, and 607.01.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. We'll move on to discussion items. Our first subject for discussion is 11.01, Fall 2024 Data Presentation. I will turn it over to Superintendent.
Thank you. Our team is going to present today our ISASP data and our fall winter benchmark data. So I'll turn it over to Diane. Diane, would you mind doing some introductions as well?
Good evening. Thank you for having us for the board presentation with our fall data. And we'll start with introductions. Diane Campbell, Executive Director of Learning and Results. And we'll just start with Kim Awalt.
Kim Awalt, Pre-K-12 Math Specialist.
Brianna Schwenk-Moshman. I'm the Secondary Director of Learning and Results.
Melissa Trimble, Specialist for Science, Social Studies, and World Language.
Bonnie A.C., Elementary Director of Learning and Results.
And Jennifer Saxon, I'm the Pre-K-5 ELA Curriculum Specialist.
And we'll start with just anchoring our questions around our IASB questions about the progress that we're making and what our next steps are, and that'll be our focus for this evening. And our objectives will be to examine our current reality around our growing excellence, and the data that we're going to be sharing will be Spring 2024 ISASP, ELA Fall Data, and Math Growth Measure. And the focus will include our prioritized actions. We also want to bring back to you the implementation science, and implementation is the process of intentionally putting in place supports that facilitate those adult behavior change, which really focuses on leading indicators. So looking at our data this evening, knowing that it is our ISASP and our fall data, we also are attaching leading indicators to make sure that we're implementing the resources with the fidelity needed. So to start us off will be Melissa with ISASP.
Thank you, Diane. Just a review that we are going to go into ISASP, which stands for the Iowa Statewide Assessment of Student Progress. And we're going to not only define the measures that we use, but how we're doing within the fields of ELA, math, and science, and then our ongoing action steps that we have in each of those areas as well. To remind everybody, the ISASP is a required assessment, so everybody is given that assessment in grades 3 through 11 for ELA, in 3 through 11 for math, and then in 5th grade we test in only 3 grade levels, 5th, 8th, and 10th. We use the ISASP data to determine areas of focus for district and building CTTs, informing our growing excellence plans, and to be able to dig down into those domain levels to find out where we're going to be able to maximize our instructions to be able to grow the scores a little bit. On the next slide, we are looking at how the ISASP data is going to start impacting our building report cards starting this next year. So we haven't gotten our new building designations yet, but once we start going forward, you'll notice that there is a heavy emphasis on ISASP now with the proficiency and growth in elementary and middle school, and then at high school proficiency growth, and then some other measures as well. But we're talking about now the ISASP factors into about 85.8% of the building report card for elementary and middle school. And in the high school, it'll be a factor of 66.6%. So these scores are going to be even more impactful as we move forward. I'm going to hand this over to Jen to do a little bit more about the ELA ISASP in specifics.
All right, so one of our growing excellence goals that we have is around ISASP, and so with that we have students achieving either a minimum of 80% proficiency or advanced scores on the ISASP in reading and math, or demonstrating a minimum of 8% increase in the median student growth percentile for both reading and math. So this goal is the same for both ELA and for math. So you'll see this on this particular slide. We have the data for ELA over the past 3 years. You can see the district percentages for both proficiency and advanced, as well as then the state percentages for those over the past 3 years. And when we look at our individual ISAS data by grade level. A couple of things that I want to point out about the data that you're looking at. So on the top, you can see you have district data that you're looking at. The bottom is the state data. And so when we're looking at this, we also have color coding that's helping us to be able to read the graphs that are there. So the yellow is our students that are not yet proficient. Then we have light blue and the dark blue. So our light blue is our proficient students, the dark blue is our advanced students, and then that green color is the combination of the two, both proficient and advanced, giving you that percentage there. And you can see that over the past 3 years. You have third grade on the left-hand side and fourth grade on the right-hand side. And again, then the state percentages for each of those grade levels are found on the bottom of the slide. So this shows us then our 5th and 6th grade. We can see some good growth in our cohort data from 5th grade at 46% in 2023 to 60% in 2024. And then I'm going to let Brianna talk a little bit more about 7th and 8th grade.
And in 7th grade, you can notice that they went from 52% proficient and advanced in 22 to 55% in 23 to 60% in 24. So some growth there. The next slides show our high school proficient and advanced and not yet proficient students on ISASP in 9th grade and 10th grade. And then the next slide shows our 11th grade students. Next, we're going to talk about math.
So math reads similar to reading as far as the goal as far as a minimum of 80% proficient or advanced scores on ISAS with a minimum 8% increase in the median student growth percentile. The purple is the overall proficiency and the yellow represents our growth, noting that this is again a 3-year goal. So for grades 3 and 4, for math, 3rd to 4th grade cohort from 22 to 23 went from 57 to 51%. Proficient and advanced increase from 12 to 13%. Looking at grades 5 and 6, proficient and advanced increased from in 5th grade from 40% in 22, 47% in 23 to 50% in 24. And the 5th to 6th cohort from 22, 23 went from 47% to 51. 6th grade proficient and advanced has stayed about the same. 51% in 22 to 52% in 23, 51% in 24. In 7th and 8th grade, the cohort from 7th to 8th and 22 to 23, from 45% stayed the same, 22, 23. The proficient and advanced increase from 7th grade, 43% 22, 45% 23 to 47% in 24, and 8th grade 41% in 22, 42% in 23, and 45% in 24. In grades 9 and 10, 9th grade 37% in 22, 34% in 23, and 33% in 24, and 10th grade 40% in 22, 41% in 23, and 38% in 24. In grade 11, 36% in 22 to 41% in 23, and 32% in 24. Melissa for science?
As I said, science is only done in the 3 grade levels, so grades 5, 8, and 10. We did notice a decrease in proficient and advanced for both the 5th grade and 8th grade. 10th grade did show a slight increase in proficient and advanced from last year. And the cohort data is trickier to do because we skip grade levels in the test itself. But I do want to point out that the 5th graders in 2021, who then would be the 8th graders in 2024, did show an increase in science from 31% to 45%.
So looking at this data, we know that we have room for growth, and we have really spent a lot of time digging into how do we get to that growing excellence goal based on where we are now. So we've put together some implementation plans with leading indicators that will help us take those next steps to get to that growing excellence goal. And a couple of those next steps are outlined on this next slide. The first is really digging into the data, and we're going to do that at the DSAT level, including drilling down by subgroups to ensure that supports are in place with a lens towards disproportionality, looking to make sure that our supports are done equitably throughout the district. Then our next piece is really working with our CTTs. We want our teachers to also engage with data. We want them to look at our content domains, and we want them to help determine next steps with students in preparing for our ISASP assessments. We really feel that those CTTs are a really critical vehicle for making that progress. Next, we really think that being visible in classrooms is a key piece in this partnership between the Learning and Results team and teachers. We want them to know that we are a partner in this work and that we support and care about their work and champion them. We not only support them, but we work to help make sure that the curriculum that we've implemented is done with fidelity, and that the rigor that we have selected for our students and for our staff is being implemented every day for every kid. And we do that by being present in the classrooms. So that partnership is growing, and those relationships are building. And then the last piece is professional development for teachers on research-based best practices that will increase student engagement in instruction, because when students are engaged, students are learning. So we really want to increase that student participation, that peer-to-peer interaction, and students really grappling with their curriculum and getting to those higher levels of depth of knowledge. So we're working on getting professional development to teachers on those really important things.
So we're going to shift data from ISASP to FAST. And so we're going to jump right into 3 outcomes for our fall FAST data. Again, just looking at those assessment measures we use. What's our current reality telling us about FAST data and our healthy indicators, like we've presented to you before. In addition, just kind of follow up with some of those action steps supporting our improvement plan. So at the elementary level, and this should look really familiar, we have those 6 healthy indicators, which are intended to help the district and buildings reflect and monitor the overall health of our MTS system. Those are the ones in color around the outside, really focusing on universal instruction, our core instruction and intervention systems. We also want to continue to use these indicators to help us monitor the work that we're doing in our implementation plan for literacy. Next slide, thank you. This is our Growing Excellence goal for FAST, which states that by June of 2025, 80% of all third graders will meet the spring CVM FAST benchmark. And so while this goal is for third grade, our data that we're going to share moving forward is actually all K-6 because we definitely screen all of our students and want to share that fall data with you. When you're looking at this data slide, you can see our DCSD percentages by year compared to the state average. We wanted to add that this year because while 80 is our goal and where we want to get to, that is we hold high expectations for all students. We also know that we want our goal to be attainable and something that we can make small gains towards as we go continually towards reaching that 80%. So we wanted to show that state average for that. There is an error on here, a typo. In 2024, in the spring, we were actually at 57% proficient. So that should say 57. So our first healthy indicator states that 95% of students are screened, and this is intended to help our educators see whether our K-6 students are being universally screened for literacy 3 times a year. Each screening window, we really monitor this closely as the data that's being collected. You can see that we've consistently hit that goal of 95% of our students being screened. This helps us to know that we are collecting consistent and ongoing data of our students, that we can examine the progress they're making and help determine instructional next steps. With healthy indicator number 2 is that 90% of students who are below benchmark during their most recent screening window will be progress monitored 80% of the time. This slide shows the overall percentage from fall to winter over the previous 3 years. The above 3 graphics give the weekly progress monitoring percentages. We won't be able to compare, have that last graph until after our winter benchmark this year, and then we can update that. We continue to work with our leaders to support teachers with progress monitoring practices, again, as this is a great measure to help us ensure that we're collecting that regular data in order to make those instructional decisions. For healthy indicator number 3, this one is intended to help educators see whether students are meeting the literacy benchmark. This indicator is directly tied to our district growing excellence goal that I shared before, where 80% of our third grade students will be at or above benchmark each screening window. The rationale for 80% is that core instruction needs to be working for enough students that we don't overwhelm the intervention system. This also speaks to our focus with our new curriculums to really focus on the core instructional resources and implementing those with fidelity. We also examined this indicator by grade levels and subgroups to determine specific gaps and needs for support. This, you can see underneath the chart for fall, it shows the previous year's data over 4 years.
So our last few indicators are ones that they actually are measured for the year. And so you can see we don't have the most recent, but that healthy indicator 4 is really looking at students that were at or above benchmark, and are they maintaining that status? And that's something that we'll definitely want to watch closely this year with the implementation of our new core resource. Our healthy indicator 5 is our next indicator, which is one that we're currently collecting. So it's those students that are below benchmark. Do we have them scheduled in an intervention that we are documenting? And so you can see the previous years, and our fall to winter data will be recorded once we have closed that winter screening window. And the final indicator is healthy indicator 6, which is another one that we really want to keep a close eye on this year, but that's one that's recorded from fall to spring. So you can see the previous 3 years of fall to spring, and this is the goal that at least 65% of students who were below benchmark are moving to that at or above benchmark status. And so we'll want to watch that as we continue on with our new program implementation this year as well. So if we look at our current district state, we can see that across K-6, we have our data over the past 5 years that are represented on this graph. You can also see then the green line is indicating the 80% goal. Reminder that when we shared our data with you in the summer, we had also shared that 6th grade would no longer be doing the FAST assessment. So you'll notice they do not have a score for this fall because they did not take that particular assessment. So this next graphic is just another way to look at it. This helps us to be able to see that cohort data. So if we follow colors across, we can see students from kindergarten through to the next grade. So obviously, for example, that yellow would be our kindergarten students in 23. Oh, should be, we have an extra one there. That doesn't help, does it? But anyways, following across our years from 23, 24 to 24, 25, and so on, moving across that graphic. So we're looking at that data across. We also did put a hard line in there to indicate the implementation of our new core resource, just so that we have that as a record of when did we start that, so we can monitor the progress from before and then after that implementation as well.
This is our first collection of data from MAP screening for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. This is on the left, you'll see the percentile, the average percentile for the class. You can see how the class kind of shook out in terms of proficient and non-proficient. And then the average RIT score is that 204, 208, and 209. And the RIT score is a score that MAP assigns that is on a continuum that's kind of like measuring students on a yardstick. So we would expect to see that grow each year. And then that final number is the number of students total that were tested. So that is our first look at what MAP data looks like.
I don't understand your colors. There's no code there. 26, 24, 22, 29. I don't know what that means for each group. And when I looked at it at home, I was like, okay, I need a code.
Sure. So those bands, let me.
We can look that up.
I will look that up for you. Yep.
So if we want to go to just kind of a summary of our FAST data in the area of ELA, there are a number of actions that we've completed or are in progress. And, first just to, talk to our structure for letters. We've been able to provide that ongoing yearly letters training by cohort. So every year, new teachers, new cohort, just to continue along with that essential learning. We are in year 1 currently with our new curriculum adoptions for both elementary and secondary following our field test the previous year. In addition, we're utilizing those in-service days, coaching visits, and implementation support visits to provide professional development with our teachers and coaches, supporting them around our new curriculum. A new one we're really proud of is just in an effort to really support those new curriculum resources and fidelity of implementation. We are holding weekly professional development and collaboration with our building principals, as well as all of our instructional coaches, where we're just helping to build that capacity at the elementary level right now around their knowledge and expertise with our new ELA curriculum resources so that they can best support teachers in their building. We're going to continue to work in the areas over on the right there, just with building teacher confidence with our new curriculum and the instructional delivery of those resources, wanting to continue to support teachers with embedding engagement strategies that has to go along with any new curriculum that we have, while also ensuring that we are meeting that grade level rigor of each standard. We want to continue to take that weekly leadership learning opportunities to the secondary level as well, and want to provide those monitoring and feedback supports with implementation of our new resources, as well as support the secondary as they have a new screening opportunity to screen our students with the map, as Brianna mentioned, and just helping them with those practices at the secondary level.
So for math, we're going to take a look at our screening data, our current reality, and then the steps that we're taking to support our growing excellence goals. So in the elementary, the A-math assessment is not a requirement for math. So we are no longer using A-math. What you'll see on the slide is going to be the data for the last 5 years when we did take the A-math assessment. Showing the students that are proficient in the fall screening benchmark over those years, and the color coding matches the cohort data. Growth measure is the screener that we are now using, K8, and it is a little different in how it is scored compared to A-math. Growth measure is an adaptive assessment, and so the scores that you see here it's based on the student growth. So what you're going to see here is scores based on end of year outcomes for a grade level. So students are not expected to score high at the beginning of the year, knowing that they have not been exposed to all of the grade level standards. So they're not going to be showing, most of them are not going to be showing proficient. Here we have the middle school fall scores. Again, for A-math, no longer are taking A-math, and we are using the growth measure. I do want to point out that in 8th grade, the students who are taking the algebra course are taking MAP growth. So those students would not be reflected in this score. So the 16.4 score for growth measure would be all students in 8th grade except for those students who are taking algebra as 8th graders. I think this is Bonnie.
I don't remember who we said was doing the slides. I'll do it. So for math, again, just some of those really great actions that have been going on with math. Implementing a rigorous math curriculum, pre-K-8, in addition to what we're taking with algebra right now at our high school. Those MTSS tiers of support, really utilizing those structures to have a tier 2 system built in, especially at our middle school. Very exciting work there. Increased math instructional time with those double blocks, implementing that high school screener for MAP for all 9th graders with algebra, and the ongoing professional development and coaching. We have HMH coaches continually in our buildings on an ongoing basis, providing coaching and feedback. They've been going very well. We're going to continue with some next steps to just help protect teachers' time, really wanting to ensure that they're getting their CTT time to help plan and prepare for their lessons, and really getting comfortable with our new resources. We want to continue to brainstorm and find solutions around scheduling barriers. Understanding that at the secondary level, they're not able to have that much needed time for collaboration within CTTs, just with, again, the way that our schedules and timing are happening. So how can we be creative and find solutions? And continuing that continuous improvement to include MTSS collaboration work at our secondary level as well.
If you go back to slide 33, I can tell you what those colors mean. Okay, so the blue is students who scored in the above the 80th percentile. The green are students who were in the 61st through the 80th percentile. The yellow are students who are in the 41st through the 60th percentile. The orange are students who are in the 21st through the 40th percentile. And the red would be the 1st through the 20th percentile.
Can you make sure you send that to Brenda? So we can get
Absolutely.
that updated and so
Absolutely.
everyone else knows.
Yep.
All right, questions. Director Hayes.
The last time we did these numbers, I want to say it was President Gosa closed out with the statement of how the numbers fell with the African American students. In this, we're more non proficient for the most part. And for the non proficiency, going back to the first slide, for the majority of the groups that we serve, my question is I would like to see those African American numbers to see just how low they did fall, because we've approved a lot of programs and so many things have been implemented, but I'm not seeing the numbers change. And there has to be a reason for it. So we have to literally take growing excellence serious, because these numbers are embarrassing. And I know it was hard. I appreciate everything that you all have done, but I know it has been hard to sit here and deliver these numbers to us, not knowing what we were going to say about them, and just so it's out there. The numbers are embarrassing.
Yeah, I would agree. And it is tough to take a look at these numbers and know that this is where we are and not where we want to be at all. So I know that the Learning and Results team has been working very closely with building leaders, but with TLCS coaches. So when we talk about implementation, that's why that implementation science is so important for our learning right now, so that when this happens, we roll this out in a way that is going to have the impact that was intended to have. And being able to work with teachers to find out what the barriers are and remove those barriers. We had some sessions today, some amazing professional development to be able to support teachers around pacing and what happens when we get off pacing too much, and how do we stay on track so that we're delivering and getting the learning to support students in the best way possible. And then to your point about the data review too, when we do deep dives with the data, we definitely look at student group data across the board. How are all of our students doing? Because that's where the equity piece comes in, and that's where we can really see what's happening within the day-to-day around the data with our student groups. So we do look at those very closely.
Do these filter out students who would, when they take the test, they just fill out random ones, or they do, just proves A, just X, 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 no? Okay, so I think that in order to take these seriously and to actually assess this, we have to also realize that a lot of people don't take this seriously at all. They just randomly do it. And I think there has to be some type of survey with the students to figure out just how many people are genuinely not even trying on these at all. And because, the percentages are low. Is that low just because in our area that people just aren't taking it seriously at all? And if that's the case, we need to definitely emphasize students to actually try on these tests, because I personally know plenty of people that I've talked to who don't care about this at all. Don't even try. So definitely prioritizing this test is going to be important if we want to actually use this for moving forward.
That is, yeah, I think we need to give you a standing ovation because that is something that our buildings have been grappling with. That is something our team has looked at, skill versus will. Our teams have, I know building leaders have really worked with students to find out what the challenges are and to let them know how important these scores are and how important the implications of this data. And we're just not there yet, because I think when we look at these, it does represent that will, like, what's in it for me type of approach with the assessment. And I would love to work with student leadership teams, youth groups, building the youth leadership teams to find out what we could do differently to help share that message about how important they are. So yes.
Benny, go ahead.
I agree with his statement so much, but I think this is more of a problem to be tackled from the tools that we use. I know that our curriculum has been changing a lot recently, but we also need to look at the tools that we're using to assess these students and if they're excuse me, if they're able to like rule out statistical anomalies to be able to have more accurate like picture of what our students are actually capable of, but not just the will. And I've noticed something that works is incentivizing our students. For ISASP, I remember at the secondary level at our school, students were able to opt out of one additional final. And due to that, we did see a lot of improvements in our ISAS scores. So I think it's a question of are our tools actually rigorous enough and actually providing us with the in-depth data that we need to be able to help and accurately assess our students, not just well.
I think that a potential way we can assess people like the anomalies is by the amount of time it takes to take the test. And like, so like if they're getting done in 2 minutes, then obviously they're not thinking when they're doing it. And I'm sure that you can have some type of AI to detect obvious like patterns with like just doing Z's or, you know, whatever. So I would definitely look into that so you could find an accurate representation.
Thank you, student board members. Director Beck?
Oh, is there another student board member that wanted to talk? Okay, there's another student board member who wanted to talk.
Go ahead, you first.
Okay, so I think a big thing is if it's not measured and if students aren't getting like a grade that's going to hurt them on this, they're not really going to try. So maybe there's something that we could come up with, some sort of incentive, like Central, I guess they opted out of finals. Like, I think if we are just able to like either give them some sort of grade that's like actually going to make them want to like do well and succeed on this, it would help, or just any sort of incentivization, because a lot of times we don't even get to see the scores. Like I haven't seen any of my ISF scores. So I could see where a lot of people would not want to try on that just because it means nothing to them. So I think involving the student more in the process and not just telling them, hey, this is important, and not really telling them why, could be a big thing in helping improve those scores.
Thank you. Director Beck.
So it's really funny that the students brought up some statistics, because I was actually just thinking about that, and whether there is whether some of the data are not quite as accurate as they could be, just because it's really hard to weed out some of those some of those outliers. But my main question was kind of more about examples of some of the adult behaviors that would come out of looking at the data, right? And so you guys, and I don't expect you to have an answer right now, because I honestly hadn't thought of this question really until you guys were presenting it again, but you have your sort of next steps. I'm trying to let me find a slide, like slide 21. And it says that at CTTs, for example, teachers will engage with data on content domains to help determine next steps with students. And so since it's a CTT, I realize that means that those teachers are focusing only on the classrooms of students in their building, right? So at that level, it's very personal. They know the individual students, and they're looking at who's succeeding and who maybe isn't. But what are some of the kinds of things that might come out of that? So just saying, okay, student X, Y, and Z in this classroom is not meeting the benchmark we want them to meet in terms of growth. What are some of the kinds of things specifically that might come out of that CTT? Like, what would a teacher say? I am going to do this differently, or we are going to introduce this to this student. Can you guys give some examples of that?
So at the elementary level, when we're looking at our FAST data, we also follow that up with the analysis using the UTT, which is the Universal Tier Tool. And with that, then they're looking at the data that's presented. So we look at district-wide data, and we have conversations across buildings at that time as well to talk about some of the things that they're noticing. They also then look at their building data. From there, then they drill it down into individual classrooms. But from that point, then when teachers are talking about NCTTs, a lot of that is then focused on what's going to happen for interventions for students to help support students and what kind of scaffoldings might need to be put in place during core in order to help support those students as well. So that's kind of like the layers for that FAST data as far as how it transfers through our system. Does that help with that?
Yeah, but like when you say, what kinds of scaffolds need to be put in place, say with core. So maybe the CTT group realizes that, the most of the class is missing this component. What would then the teacher be doing that they wouldn't have been doing if everybody had that component, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. Like, do they go reteach it? Do they add an additional tool in? I mean, I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around what does this look like at that level?
Yeah, and one of the things that we find challenging is that there's that balance between, because we want our core instruction to really be representing those skills that students need to have at all times. So previous practice would be that, if students are lacking in fluency, then we're going to have this extra separate time for fluency practice. And what we found is, though, we also need to be talking about when is fluency happening within the core? When are students getting that opportunity for intentional practice? The other thing that's happening with our planning is that with our new program, there are built-in like sidebar supports. So part of the conversation that teachers are having throughout all of their planning for all of their lessons with CKLA is really talking about which supports are going to need to be put into place for which groups of students, for which classroom. And so that's really kind of how it plays out at that point, and looking at what do we need to do for each separate learning target, and then also keeping in mind that overall goal of we have students who need to be practicing fluency. So how do we have that intentional practice happening within our core as well?
One other question, I guess, the is there a breakdown by school where we can say, this group of teachers has these types of students based on demographics or prior performance or whatever measure you choose, and this group of teachers has the same group of students. This group a similar group of students. I mean, this section has seen, a 2% increase in growth. This section's only seen a 1% increase in growth. I mean, that's really not that different, but you get the idea. Like, what are the teachers doing differently here? Do they have, or even the opportunity to like say, okay, you guys have the same types of students in terms of demographics or readiness levels or whatever unit you want to use to compare. You guys should get together and collaborate, even though you're in very different buildings, just because you have similar students, right? Does that happen? Do we have that opportunity baked in anywhere?
A version of that. And if your original question just around collaborative teacher teams and the value of those, what you described, I believe, happens on any teacher team. If there's 3 fifth grade teachers, we're going to pull up the data. We're going to look at how we're teaching a certain thing, and if we have varied results, then that's where we call the collective efficacy. There is examples when it's across town. We have cross-campus collaborative teacher teams that are going on in certain instances. But I wouldn't say that there's an exact effort. What I did want to maybe add when I was listening to the report and going through the data, and Director Hayes, I think that everyone in the room is kind of equally frustrated with the lack of movement in our data, and also maybe with a dose of realism that where we have started over the last couple years has been a foundational kind of start. And what I mean by that is starting back with our tools, our instructional tools. And we're not guessing, if I think about some of the terms that we heard, the healthy indicators. I mean, this is coming from the Department of Education, where they say, here are the healthy indicators that you should look at that hopefully will tell you if you're doing these things right, then the lagging indicators will start to show. Now, if you go through the entire presentation, some of our healthy indicators we're doing well, and others we're not doing as well. And that's part of our reality. So then we ask, well, what's next? And there's a variety of sources we look to. I think about the building blocks where it says, do you have, to our student board members' comment, do you have the right tools, our instructional tools, how we're assessing it? Do we have the right time and opportunity? I heard Bonnie talk about it. We had to adjust our schedules to make sure that we had enough time to teach math in the math block. We had to double our reading block to make sure. And we weren't just guessing like, hey, I think this might be a good idea. Really, the Department of Ed and Differentiated Accountability created that for us. And so then we are starting to kind of answer those questions. Do we have the time? Do we have the resources? Now we're into, but what about the actual routines? The adult actions, as one of our board members talked about. And that's when we get into professional development and collaborative teacher teams. So the collective efficacy of multiple teachers with a specialist saying, this is how to use this. This is how much time to spend in these certain areas. And realistically, man, that takes a lot of time to move practice through our letters training and whatnot. So no, the lagging data is not where it needs to be, but every single piece that this report showed is grounded in science, it's grounded in research, and is grounded in best practice. And it would just take about twice as long of a presentation to kind of explain all the sources of all the things that they're saying, and this is where we're going next, as John Hattie would tell us in his research. And this is where we're going next, as differentiated accountability would tell you is the right move. So it's not as excuse making as much as maybe just some additional context, around the presentation that we heard, if I could.
Director Potts, do you have anything?
I just wondered, we seem to be 20 to 30 percentage points below the state average on most all of these assessments. And I'm wondering how we might compare, instead of the state average, to comparing ourselves to other urban districts, Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, Waterloo. Because we seem to, I don't want to belabor the point, but I almost feel like we're in the movie Groundhog Day. We get the stats. Oh, they look the same. We get the stats. We look the same. We're like in a treadmill. We're not heading anywhere. And just something's got to give.
Thank you, Director Potts. Director Barnes, did you have anything?
I too would be interested in how we compare to the UEN schools. That was a question that I had. The other question, and perhaps this is just process, how is this data shared throughout the school district, from the school board to the frontline teacher? What is the process? What is the sort of sequence for sharing this data?
We do have, excuse me, a Leadership Academy Day for the elementary. It's the universal tier tool, and that's where the building leadership teams come together and go through the fall data, and we'll do that again in the winter. and then they work through their CTT. So that's how that is cascaded. With our ISASP, we share that with principals and do an overview, and then working with the building leadership teams again.
Director Barnes, did you have anything else?
No, nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Poston?
Kind of a follow-up to Director Hayes' question. Like on the lower percentage, I'm looking at slide 33. In that lower percentage there in the red, is there any way of pulling out, and I don't want to create a bunch of busy work or anything, but to pull out how many of those students in that category went through preschool, and then how many kids have attendance issues? Because I think that's one thing that's really affecting a lot of our scores, is just what kind of early development have these children had, and then what is their attendance? Because if they're not in school, how are you going to improve scores? It's just not going to happen. And so I appreciate everything that you're doing, and along with the teachers on the front line. But again, some of this is totally out of our control. They don't have the help early on, and we're talking about 8th graders here. That many of them are. What happened up to this point? So it's pretty hard to me. It's pretty hard to play catch up. Once they're in 8th grade. So.
We have worked this past couple years on the early warning systems, and so our high schools are really focusing on that, and then also working towards getting that available at the middle school, and that overlays attendance, behavior, grades, in multiple data points. But we can also talk with the superintendent about what that would look like to include a VLOOKUP or something with the comparison of kindergarten and or preschool and attendance.
Director Klein-Jerome?
We used to get our data presented in terms of not only race, as was brought up, but also special ed. And for the last couple of years, we have not seen that. We were cited because of special ed. I think it's important that we get a breakdown so we know, are we making progress? Are we not making progress? Because I certainly don't want the state coming in saying, oh, wait, you went through this once before. And I would like to see it broke down by ethnic group as well. I think that's important rather than just saying, here's the whole district. Well, how is that compared to individual groups? CTT time. How often in the high school do they have, let's say in a week, how many times would they meet regarding that?
That is an area of growth for us for sure, to get consistency. We do not have it in the schedule where there is a common time for teachers to meet. So then it is before school, after school, and any kind of extended time that we can get. So that definitely is something that we continue to look at ways to address.
How about in the middle school?
Middle school does have the collaborative teacher time before school again. And there are some that have it scheduled during the day. So it's a little bit of a mix at the middle school.
Once a week, twice a week?
It's once a week typically.
And the elementary?
So at the elementary, they would have 2 CTTs a week that they're able to have common planning time with their grade level teams, one for ELA and one for math. Many of our buildings have built in a rotation at that time to focus on our new Character Strong SEL curriculum as well. So it might be like every other week they would do math, or they would do SEL instead. But again, that is, I think we talked about barriers was one of the things we want to work on with scheduling and collaboration time at the elementary level, because they have part of our scheduling guidance was a minimum of 45-minute specials in order to give teachers that collaboration time. So that has been an easier lift with our new curriculums at the elementary because they have that built in. Those time, they don't have common planning time at the secondary within scheduling, so it makes it more challenging.
Yeah, and this is going to be a repeat of what I've said before, but they have 5 prep periods in the elementary in a week, and you're taking 2 of them. That is a concern to me because they need that playing time as well as the middle school and the high school.
So really excited.
Before we step over and keep saying, oh, but you can do more, and we're going to just give it to you. But the high school, well, it's hard to figure out, so we're not doing it. My concern is the elementary.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to share about that is we've worked with the principals and the coaches on what does that CTT time look like now with our new curriculum resources, making it absolutely focused on planning. So the instructional coaches have worked with Jen on a structure where teachers would pull out their manual, they're preparing a lesson together, reviewing it, especially like today we just did like the pacing suggestions. So as they're reading the learning objectives together, going through the lesson, focusing on what materials do I need, what are some questions I need to ask specifically based on my student data, all the kind of things that you're talking to are so important for how do we make the best use of that time when we can pull them together. And so Jen and I have been able to join, I think we're up to 7 of our elementary buildings now and sit through their CTTs with them just to see how that structure is going. And they're extremely positive about being able to utilize that time specifically for planning and support together. So I'm excited to continue to gather feedback on that because that's what we want. We know that's what they need to.
Yeah.
Director Beck?
I did want to say, I mean, a lot of this information we can find on the Iowa School Performance Profiles page. And I'm assuming, I haven't looked at all the numbers, but it's the same numbers, right? If we look at Davenport as a whole district that you guys present to us. And they have a compare tool, so you can actually compare with another district. You can't compare like all UEN districts, but you can pick one and compare at least some of the bigger measures. So if anybody wants to do that, it's the Iowa School Performance Profiles website. And it only goes through 2023, but still.
Thank you. I have a couple questions, and the student board members kind of helped tee this up for me. I'm going to assume that with these test scores, it's broken down by the building, by the classroom, all the way down to the student. Now, my question with that is, when the student takes the test and that stuff comes back, does that go to the teacher and the teacher is able to say, well, I know the student can do better than this? And then to add on to that, along with what Director Pashin said, I think the attendance needs to be put in there too. Is this kid that's underperforming only at school, 5 hours a day, 3 hours a day because they're late all the time? And things like that, because again, that's missing core instruction time. I think that's a huge thing that I know you take it into account, but it doesn't look that way when we see that stuff. We need to see that stuff because in the paper, it's going to be, oh my God, we're failing all these kids. Well, no, sometimes it's parents failing their kid, not getting them to school in time and things like that. I know as building principals go above and beyond trying to make sure kiddos get to school, buying alarm clocks, bus passes. We go out of our way for a lot of things, and I fully believe that, but at the end of the day, there's other folks that are accountable for this stuff too. It's not just all on us. So along those lines, it is broken down to the student. I've seen a lot of you shake your head on that. And is it compared with the attendance on the days that are missed and things like that? Is that a huge variable in there from what you've seen?
It would have to be something that at the building level to be able to do that comparison to say, here are the scores, here's the VLOOKUP with the attendance to know what that percentage would be, but it's doable.
Okay. So is that something that would be on the building principals?
We could work with building principals and see what that would look like to be able to pull a system together to
Okay.
review it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that would be good for them to work with their teachers too, because again, and it might be certain teacher para teams are reach students of different in different schools, right? Because we have all kinds of different kids, they all learn differently and things like that. Um, I agree with some of the like collaboration and things like that, but sometimes what works in Fillmore might not work in Harrison, it might not work in Truman. I mean, if it did, we would have great youth sports teams and everything like that. Sometimes things don't work, especially when we try to do the same things in some areas. So I agree with the collaboration, but sometimes things have to be different. You have to be able to meet those kids where they are in the building, the demographics, and all that.
I would just like to add to on
Yeah.
the attendance piece that one of the things that I've seen in the past year or two is an incredibly strong partnership and collaboration. So working with Courtney's team on attendance and all the work that they're doing. So that implementation team is, they're on it, actually coordinating with the communications department and the communications director to put those incentives out and to really bring to light how important attendance is. And so even at the beginning of the year, the celebrations of that 90% attendance and making sure that students knew it and created, the excitement at the elementary level. And I really just want to bring that to light too, that it is multiple departments working together to address the data in multiple different ways, because it isn't just one thing. It's multiple variables that are impacting this data. The other piece about attendance, I know, Bonnie, last year with the interventions, and that was one of the questions that came up when we were looking at the root cause of our students not making progress when they were in interventions, and we did the comparison of attendance, and it has an impact, and so we're noticing that, and so it definitely is something that we can take a look at, across the board too with each of the assessments.
Okay. And then my other question, so you gave us like multiple years, right? So if they're in kindergarten this year, they're in first grade. With the way that these test scores are coming out, for each year, is it the same students in their kindergarten year are struggling, they're struggling in their first grade year, second and third grade, or is it some of them pick it up and then others that were strong there are kind of falling behind here, or is it the same set of students for every one consistently?
There's a report that we have looked at in the past. It's called the Chutes and Ladders, and it shows the students that were not on benchmark, or that were not, and they moved up, and then opposite those that were and that moved off. And so that visualization is really the one to look at when we're processing data on students that are maintained or going up or dropping off.
Okay. But it's not the same student every time. They might be
correct,
good for a couple years and then they fall off, but then they pick back up. Okay.
Yeah, the one indicators, or the two indicators, excuse me, that we have that kind of help us track that at least throughout a year. So when we talked about healthy indicator 4, that is looking at those students that are maintaining their status from the start to the end, and it does measure then students that have taken the assessment. So it has to be within that particular window. So you can see right there when we're looking at that, the goal is 95%, but we're losing students because we're at 87%. So somewhere we're losing students in that indicator itself. And then healthy indicator 6 is another one. That's the one looking for students that are below and are they growing to at or above. So we have a few students there that we're gaining. So we can see we're at 19%, not anywhere near that goal, but we do have students that are gaining there. So the goal would be we have students that are gaining and we're maintaining our students. And that's something that we do like to look at those indicators very carefully throughout the year, because that is a really good measure of what you're kind of talking about as well.
And then my other question, attendance kind of plays into this, but open enrollment, we lose a lot of kids like in the elementary level, right? Because they don't even give us a shot. Does that mess with the data here? Because we might have had this many kids this year, but then we lost some. Or does it affect that?
Comparison when you're looking at fall to spring,
Right.
using
But
the
I
same
mean, when you
student.
go from your kindergarten year to your first grade year, do we have the same amount of kids? And that, so, because when you show that, sometimes it doesn't look, it should be going up, but it doesn't look like it does. And I didn't know if that factored in, or we might get new kids in that aren't used to what we're doing in our district. Is that a huge impact, a small impact, or?
I wouldn't be able to reference the actual impact of the student or with that specific data point that you're talking about. I do know that in the fall to spring, it is it is the same student group, so that doesn't change. And if there's somebody that comes in the fall to spring data, they're just not included in that data set.
Diane,
And
I
then-
think, Diane, quick question on that. Does HMH, I thought, had a tracking point that said the kids that were with you at the beginning of the year and the kids that were with you at the end of the year, here's where they were at, so that you kind of understood just that specific group? Because I think that's what you're asking, right?
Yeah.
Kids who stay with us, what happens with them versus coming and going? And I thought HMH had that detail in theirs.
Thank you. And then my last question is incentivizing it. So some of the buildings that have better scores, and I'm not asking you to say which buildings or whatever, are they doing something different to incentivize it that the other ones aren't, and that's why they're getting that success rate? And that's why I asked about broken down to the classroom, because maybe it's something that teacher's doing in that classroom that is getting those kids to do that. Has that been like looked at? I'm saying when it's all broken down like that, obviously there's a reason that some succeed more than others. And what is that? Have we figured that out? So we're doing the same thing, or we're doing those incentives in some other areas and see if that works to pick that up?
Last year, there was a team when Alyssa Hansel was a lead on creating some different options for incentivizing students and taking that back to buildings. So there was some work done, across all buildings to get that information out, and again, that's an area that we'll come back to so that we can grow that each year, because it really is something to not only get the information out to students about the importance of the assessment, but what's in it for them and how it could benefit them individually. So,
Okay.
well, more to come.
Do you know, was that followed through from the last time though? And some folks did, because the test scores are not looking good. I mean, I'm not sugarcoating anything, but there's a lot of room for growth, and we just have to do way better than we're doing. I'm not saying no one's doing nothing. I don't want you to take that away, but we're failing somewhere, and we have to find where we're failing, whether if it's a kid gets a trinket or whatever, and that gets them engaged to do that, or whatever it is to get them to get engaged with doing that, is what we have to find to reach them. Because at the end of the day, if we don't get them now, I think it was said before, by 8th grade, they're already on the trajectory of where they're at. But when you get them when they're like so inquisitive and want to know everything and learn everything, that's where we get them. If we can get them there, that's going to carry on all the way through. I wholeheartedly believe that. So again, it is a lot of catch up for the older kids, but if we can get these ones and just kind of move them along and figure out what that magic sauce is to make that happen. And obviously it's going to have to evolve every year because every class is different. When I went to school, we wanted all the electives. Now kids might not want to go all day. So, it's just, I think everything comes in cycles and things like that. But if we can figure that out, I know there's multiple factors that play into things. Attendance is huge. We seen it when we went out to buildings, and when kids show up 10 minutes late to class, 15 minutes late to class, that sets them behind. No doubt about it. But it's just every time we see these and it doesn't seem like they get any better, there's something, and we just have to, I don't want to belabor it, but we're very serious about this. We have to do better. I don't know if it's we need to stand up in front of every building and tell them we got to do better. We have to reach these kids. We are doing a disservice to our students when we don't do better as adults. So if anyone has anything else, I think I went way too long. Thank you very much for the presentation. And thanks for taking all the grief from us. Appreciate it. Shoulders are going to be hurting a little bit when you're walking out the door. I get it. All right, we'll move on to subject 11.02, policies for board review. I will turn it over to Vice President Klein Jerome.
This does address the issue of cell phones. I also had talked to TJ, but he's not here at the moment. We were told Central and Williams were focused on the cell phones. That's not quite true. All the junior highs are. The phones are in the locker, or is that correct? And also that West High is doing something with the boxes like Central is, or
West High, I can speak for the two buildings in the West region. West High more has the phone pouches in each room. It's not necessarily a box.
Okay.
Smart is, their policy isn't too much different than it was off and away. They're not using any specific, holding containers or anything for that. I do know they have a practice in place over at Sudlow Middle School, because my son goes there, where you drop it off at the 9th period and then you pick it up at the end of the day. So I would agree that that all buildings have some sort of effort, but I think it was reported to the board that Williams and Central took took the charge on that beginning of the year.
right? But I had heard from a parent at Sudlow, very happy with the way it's going, and that they are dropped off and they're not out there. So it is in more buildings than what I think we were believing at the beginning of the year. So that's a plus. So this would also address that. So anybody have questions, discussion on this? Director Beck?
My only question was about like the smartwatches and things like that. So students can't use them. I know like when I tell students to put their phones away, generally speaking, they're not on their smartwatches also, but I know that, texts come through on there, and I don't think we're necessarily asking students to take off their watches. So I'm just, I'm not saying we should do anything with it. I'm just curious about like if that's been an issue at all, or if that's just sort of a case by case thing. We'll worry about it.
That's actually, as you started to say that, I thought, I haven't heard from that yet, but I see my friend
Dr. Barney.
Yeah. So in my PD opportunities to get into buildings today, I heard something that I haven't heard in many, many years. And the teachers were saying that I haven't said this in a long time, but they're passing notes to one another. So your concern about watches is, I think it's duly noted that our young folks, where there's a will, there's a way. And so the absence of cell phones in many of the buildings, not all of our buildings are implementing a particular policy, but the majority of them are. But they are trying to find a workaround, whether it's using Google Meets to communicate or Google Chat. I mean, and once we shut that down, then they go on to the next thing. So I think we can anticipate that they will continue to find ways. But what we do know is the cell phones and much of the baggage that has come along with that in many of the buildings has been reduced significantly. So,
Student board members, any input on this?
I figured that would be like the hot topic.
I feel that for the specific thing about the watches, I see where like the concern rises, because it is basically a phone on your wrist. So it's like you're not really putting your phone away because you have it on you. But I feel that not many students fully realize the capacity of what their watch can do, so that they don't really use it. So for the watches, I wouldn't say that it's it's really not an issue, at least that I've seen in our building specifically. So, but in terms of like class engagement in that, I will say that it has increased a lot with, the implementing of like that, the whole like locking the phone up or whatever. And I mean, yeah, it's just mainly the thing that I've seen increase is like class engagement, but then once it comes down to like the time when socializing is allowed, like at lunch or like during passing time, that's kind of cut off because that's the only time that kids can use their phone. So they're going to use that time to be on their phone rather than talk to their friends or communicate with others. So I feel like that's the like biggest setback that I feel, but yeah, that's all I have about that.
Yes.
Biggest thing is we may hate it, but it is definitely working. But one thing that surprised me, I was very surprised to learn, is that students are not allowed to be on their phones during like passing periods or in the hallway, and that really surprised me. I was like, whoa, because my principal told me that, and I'm like, okay, wow, because I've read the handbooks, which I think we need more student access like the handbooks. I remember they were like in the planners you used to get in like middle school and elementary, but we need to know what the rules are more of. But phone policy, it's definitely working. We don't like it, but it's working.
I like that.
On the on the watches, I think that a lot of people use the watch for health, like to track their health rather than actual like, I don't know, social media. So, and I think that especially if you're like an athlete or somebody who really cares about their health, I think that you should still be able to have your watch for that purpose. So that's the only reason. That's the only reason why most people wear them. So.
Thank you. That's right. It tells time and tells me how many steps I got. That's all I need. Director Beck.
I was just going to say, in all the years that I can think of going back with students who have smartwatches, I've only ever had one student who spent a lot of time in class trying to write out texts with a finger, and I know it was not particularly effective. So I'm not worried about smartwatches. I was just kind of curious if it was an issue and if that's the kind of thing that we come to when we get it. I mean, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Everybody okay with this? Otherwise, it will come up for a vote later. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Administrative reports.
Not at this time.
Oh, nice to see you shaved, TJ.
You're a sub. You've got to say something.
Are there any board requests? All right, I do have one. Name of board member Gosa, date of request 10/14/2024. Item requested, agenda item. Description of request. I would like the policy committee to look into a policy or an admin regulation regarding dress code. We need something in place referencing DCSD staff wearing rival school clothing while at work or DCSD events. Why are you making this request? I believe it sends the wrong message to the students and families that our schools are not good enough to attend or support and leads to participation and enrollment issues. When would you like this? As soon as possible. Is there a second? You guys are cool with them wearing North Scott stuff, PV stuff?
Second.
Thank you. Sad, sad, sad. I hate picking my kid up every day, seeing that Lancer sweatshirt from the gym teacher. All right, are there any other board requests? All right, board reflections. I will start with Director Barnes.
First, I want to compliment our student board members for their keen insights, really helpful insights. First about the ISEP testing and test, and then also really appreciate their support of the cell phone changes within the schools. Last thing that I wanted to do, again, referencing our school board members, love West's outreach to students who are struggling. And also, once again, I appreciate the feeder school information, which is shared consistently. One final thing, I know it was a grilling for the learnings and results team, but that data is critically important for us if we're going to make change in this school district. So thank you for sharing it, and bear with our tough questions on that.
Thank you, Director Barnes. Director Potts?
Yeah, I would say my main reflection was on the data report we got. We're not trying to blame the messengers, but we just seem to be stuck in a loop. And we're trying all kinds of interventions, but we got to crack this in one way or another. The other reflection I have is just a question: why don't mascots ever speak?
Thank you, Director Potts. Director Beck?
I would echo the comments about our student board members' participation and being willing to speak up and give us the student eye perspective on things going on in the schools. That's super, super important. And, even if we have kids in the schools, we're not there with them in the daytime. And so it's really nice to hear from you guys, even if it's not something we necessarily want to hear. So thank you for being willing to share your experiences with us. And then the other one is the data presentation. I look forward to seeing this. The fact that we are having regular conversations, though the results or the numbers may not be where we want them to be, and are not where we want them to be, the fact that we're having constructive conversations at the board table means that the public hears us having these constructive conversations and then knows what hard work our administration is doing to try and bring our students up to speed in reading, those that are not, and math. And so I think it's incredibly important. And the fact that we're doing this on a regular basis means that reminds us that this is not just a once a year. This is not just a once in a blue moon. This is something that's really important to all of us, to the district, to board members, to students, to families. And so I appreciate all the work that's been put in and the fact that we get to do this at least 3 times a year.
Thank you, Director Beck. Director Poston?
Well, pretty much echo what Director Beck has said, but again, student board members, really appreciate your input, and it gives us another insight on and what's going on in your various schools. And again, the data presentation is critical. It's not necessarily what we want to see, but we've got a lot of people working on it, and hopefully we'll see some improvement down the road. And the other important thing too is the board and superintendent goals. We need to review them periodically and make sure that if we're not attaining some of those goals, that we need to make changes and then move on from there.
Thank you, Director Poston. Director Hayes?
Again, I guess I'm echoing what everyone has said also. And again, to thank our learning and results team for all the work they've done. You can almost look in their face when they sit down that this is the last place that they want to be in the evening, but it's something that we can all strive to work at. And also thank our new team member and welcome to DCSD. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Director Hayes. Student board members, we're going to let you get in on this, and we'll start with Lily first and then work our way down. You kind of saw how we did it. We modeled it for you, so now we're going to let you do it. It's just takeaways of what you took away from this board meeting.
So I guess my main takeaway is that you guys actually are working towards bettering our education and making sure that we are meeting the standards that we're supposed to meet and taking action towards that.
Thank you. Cohen, you're up.
I've learned that we got a lot of work to do. Those numbers were not very good, but I like that you guys are looking at it at least. And I think you guys have some good plans to work for it. So it's good that you guys talk about it.
Thank you. Benny, you're up.
I think my biggest thing from this meeting was that it was like such a good showcase of the structures that we have in place to actually make sure things are being done, and that we actually care about this districts and our students in our community, and that we're always like working hard towards it, because I know that was a really hard presentation to give that data and present it to us, and also be faced with questions that they might not necessarily have answers to right off the top of their head, but they were so organized with their delivery, and I think that was just awesome.
Thank you. Cameron, you're up.
I would first just like to acknowledge those on the board. Thank you guys for letting us put in our inputs on certain things that we have, insights towards, and hearing that presentation and hearing about how much that our test scores impact and reflect not only just us, but like the district as a whole. I feel really impacted on how now that I can tell fellow students, like, hey, we need to start really trying on these. Because I know that was one of the big points that was brought up that I totally agreed with, was that a lot of the students don't take the test that serious because they don't understand how much weight is behind it. And so I feel like hearing that really like gave me more of a push to really insinuate that, yeah, these tests are very important, and that to let that be known to my fellow students. And also just hearing about the different things going on in the different elementary schools, that's always wonderful to hear, just because I know those kids, man, they got a lot going on, even though they're so little. And it's like, being in high school, you don't really get to like hear or talk to the elementary schools a lot unless you have younger siblings. And it's just a wonderful thing to hear about them and to see the progress that they're continuing to make, even though if the test scores weren't where we want them to be, there's progress nonetheless in some aspects. So I feel like that was also very good to hear.
Thank you, student board member. You want to add something?
Yeah. I didn't, going into this, I didn't know that these scores were that serious. Because I think that if students knew how tense the room was when we were looking at those, and like how like important it was for everybody, I think it would really make people really rethink those tests. Because I didn't know. Like, I did try on them, but like a lot of people didn't. So
Just remind them that this is recorded live and it will be on YouTube, and they can watch and see how tense it really was. Thank you for that. Vice President Klein Jerome.
First, I'd like to say it is cold outside, so I would like to not be cold inside. So if we could have a little heat during these board meetings, I always appreciate that.
Negotiations ain't till January, bro.
I'm like freezing.
Tell 'em.
It is frustrating to see those scores, and I really appreciate student board members saying a lot of kids don't take them. Yeah, what's in it for me? It doesn't affect my grade, whether I graduate, and the fact that you said we need to tell our students, you as their peers, that is, I think that's where they need to hear it. Not from the teacher standing up there or school board member. These are really important, but students saying, hey, this is important. We need to take it seriously. I thought that was great insight. Hopefully, though, all the money we've put into curriculum and all the interventions and all the things that we're doing, that sooner rather than later, we're going to start seeing some results. Because every year it's like, well, we tried this, okay, hopefully we've got something, we're going to stick to it, and we are going to see some results. Let's cross our fingers.
Thank you, Vice President Klein Jerome. Mr. Driscoll.
Thank you. So my reflection is the urgency and the seriousness around this data and around these data is evident, as you talked about. You could feel it in the room. And my only little bit of a different take on it, while honoring some of the reasons that absolutely can be factors, whether it's attendance that we've talked about, whether it's student motivation, whether it's, students moving in and out, all those are factors, and they're evident in every school district. And so it's not unique to us. And anything, if we say, well, that has to account for at least 3 to 5 percentage points, yeah, so could probably Bettendorf and Des Moines and Iowa City say the same things. So while I think surfacing some of those ideas, and how can we do some motivational test talks? How can we do some things around that? I guess I want to honor that what Learning and Results came and put in front of us are the research-based and proven things, and there was no excuses. It was, this is what we're going to do to move forward. And I think this board has been both modeling and demanding accountability since the state was here, and holding ourselves, I'd say yourselves, accountable to board learning and reflections, holding us accountable. And no, it's not fun to deliver a report. I've done it before. That is not going to be real exciting. And that's what we've come to appreciate from this board, is you're not going to let it be good enough. And so my reflection is thank you for the spirit of accountability from this board.
Thank you, Mr. Driscoll. First, I do want to apologize for Superintendent Schneckloff. He had another engagement he had to get to. So, but him and I always talk, and we do greatly appreciate student board members' input. Thank you all for staying for the whole meeting. Kudos to you. Hopefully you get some extra credit or something. But it's nice to have representation from almost all of the high schools. It's great for you all to give us your input. It helps us make some of the decisions and helps with some of our questions and things that we have going on. I'm very appreciative that this district, we have student board members, and you all were willing to step up to the plate and do that, and we look forward to your input for future board meetings. And thank you again to the Learning Results team. It's very hard to come up here in front of us to do that, and you can definitely tell when you all come up here. It's very nerve-wracking for you. It is a tough crowd, but again, if we don't hold people accountable and ourselves as well, then we'll never keep moving forward that we need to do. We always have to keep student achievement in the forefront of everything we do, and that's the biggest thing. And again, when we're reaching the students, that's when things, will progress on, and they will carry that with them. And with that, Director Potts, I would entertain.
So move.
Boom. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. I'm assuming there's no discussion, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.